Welcome to another exciting episode of the Andre The Beast Crayton Show. Today, another exciting guest, another exciting show. Let me tell you what today's show is about. It's about definitely a beast mindset. But I'm going to tell you something. It's funny how people come into your life and you realize, I always tell people this, you're only this much connected to everyone that you run in contact with, which means if you sit down and listen to somebody's story, you find out you got a lot more in common than what you thought. So today I was talking to Terry. I call her TT. She'll tell you her last name because I'm not Albanian. I'm not going to try to pronounce an Albanian name. I can say Kim Kardashian. Albanian. I can say Kardashian and so forth, but I cannot pronounce Albanian names, last name, to save my life. But let's go back to what I was saying. So this lady right here, we have so much in common. She don't even know, because I found transformation in the gym, just like she did. Those of you that know my story know that I came from an athletic background, from the Olympic trials in 1984, which led to an injury, which led to the gym, which a guy was like, hey, you should do bodybuilding. I said, what the fuck is that? I'm a buck 14. And my next question was, can I make some money? And he was like, if you win. And from that moment on, the gym became a new sanctuary for me. It was not saying that I never used the gym. I was kind of intimidated with the gym aspect, to be honest. Even though I was an athlete, I maneuvered my way where I had to go to the gym. Matter of fact, I got an F in weightlifting in junior high school. So to move forward, when people see my social media, say, ain't you the guy that got an F in weightlifting, but now you're a professional bodybuilder? I said, life is fucked up, ain't it? So let's go back to TT. A story of true determination from dealing with emotional eating, weight problems. The list can go on. I'm going to let her tell you a story. So without further ado, let's welcome to the show Terry. I call her TT, and she's going to tell you her last name. What's up, baby girl?
Thank you, Andre, for having me. I really appreciate it. It's great to meet you. So my last name is actually Armenian.
Yeah, what did I say? Albanian?
And it's pronounced Tateossian. But yes, everybody, hi. It's great to be here.
So your story is truly inspirational. You know how you taken the gym as your new sanctuary and actually made a career out of the health and fitness industry. But before we get there, tell the viewers a little bit about who you are.
Absolutely. So I started my story. Gosh, where should I start? Basically, in a nutshell, really quickly. I am an immigrant from a communist country. I came to this country in 1989 when the communist wall fell down in Berlin.
I remember
And
that.
that, yeah. And so I actually escaped with my parents. So we defected in 87. I lived in Austria, which had a refugee camp, like an official refugee acceptance program. I lived there for about 2 years from the age of 11 to 13, and then came to the United States, 89, wall fell, communism was supposedly gone at the time, right? And so that's where it kind of all began in this country. So I had to learn English. I had to do all these things when I ended up going to college. So my entire life, I was inbred the notion of hard work, that what you truly want and desire in life and what your little soul is looking for is not that important, because you have to go and earn a living. You have to go make money. You have to go to school. You have to have a good job and a career and all these things, or you're going to starve, basically, because as an immigrant family, there's nowhere to fall back on. And so that's what I did for many, many decades. I sometimes had 3 jobs. I had my 9 to 5, my 6 to 9, and then I had my Saturday and Sunday job and catering, and they were all different things. So I was just working nonstop, going to school, also while having a job and all these things. So by the age of 37, I had had 2 children. They're now teenagers. I'm 48. And yeah, I was 210 pounds. And yes, I also failed gym, by the way. I had a big F in gym.
I told you something in common, man. You didn't even know that. Let's go back a minute. Let's go back a minute. I remember when the walls fell down. I remember watching it on TV. I know you were young during this time, but still there's memories of what your family was going through. What was that like living over there before that wall was down, and what was it like when that wall came down? Do you have any memories of any of that, or did your family share anything about what that lifestyle was like, or do you remember?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, while I was living in Austria, I was 11. And so my only challenge, I would say, during that time was, obviously change, but children are really easy. They're adaptable. So yeah, okay, we changed countries. I had to learn a different language. I did it pretty quickly. Again, child's brain is very different from an adult. But the challenge truly was that I left everything I knew behind, right? So my grandparents, all of my family, my brother and my sister were actually left behind, because it was a really crazy story. When you are in a communist country and you are considered a political refugee, there's a lot of really interesting situations that need to align properly in order for you to be given a visa to visit a refugee or an asylum country. And so my brother and my sister, who were, I believe, 3 years old at the time, had to stay with my grandparents. They had to stay back. And so it was only myself, my mother, and my stepfather that left the country. And so everything I knew up to that point, I had to leave behind. So I had a lot of feelings of missing people. But from an 11-year-old's perspective, you don't really know how to verbalize that. You're just kind of a little sad. But I adapted pretty quickly. I went to school. It was a little bit different because refugee children were not really looked upon in the most favorable light back then, or maybe still.
What do you mean?
And
What do you mean by that? And the reason that I'm saying, the reason that I'm asking you so many questions, because if I'm not a part of that, at least my generation, that me coming over, I don't know, maybe my ancestors, but with the way things are now in this country, and we got so many people coming abroad to American shores, we don't know what they're going through. We only know about what the media is giving us. But you were a product of the one of the waves of immigration coming over here from a political communist country. What was that like for you? What do you mean that you was not looked favorable on? Elaborate on that a little bit more.
well, when I got here, I was accepted in the United States. Nobody cared that I didn't speak English or that I had an accent, because everybody was different here. Everybody had an accent. Everybody came from a different place. People were used to having different backgrounds. And, there's a very big variety in New York, which is where I ended up landing and living in. But while I was in Austria, it was not like that, right? So in Austria, it's a lot, there's a lot fewer immigrants, and there's a lot fewer refugees, especially. And it's very obvious that you don't belong there. You weren't born there. You don't speak Austrian. So it's a little bit of a different feeling. And this was again 1987. And so, you could feel the energy. Nobody was mean to me or outwardly, not nice, but you could feel the energy that, you were not really that welcome. And I did not make any Austrian friends in 2 years. Zero, literally. My only friends were other immigrant children that were also transitioning into another country. So when I got here, I felt it, I had to adapt. Things were very different, right? So the United States and New York specifically is very different from any other place in the world. It's just so vast and everything is so big. And, there's so many people and, the transition was very interesting, but I did not feel unwelcome here.
Why is it that most refugees always tend to land? I call New York and in Florida and certain parts of Texas Plymouth Rock. Like, how do you guys know where you're going? Like, did you already have connections in New York? Because most immigrants that come here, they literally land. I'm gonna call New York what it is, Plymouth Rock. They all say, I went to New York. I went to New York. And they wind up staying in New York. Did your family have some type of political connections in New York that led you to New York? Because let's get, we got Florida, you got Indiana, you got Kentucky, you got thousands of other places on that map you could have went to, but somehow or another they always land in New York and they stay in New York.
Yes, so I can tell you how it worked in 87 from my memory as a child. What I knew, what the process was, is okay. So what we ended up doing is I'm Armenian, but I was originally born in Bulgaria. And so in order to leave the country and go to a capitalist type of other foreign country, you need a visa. And so our visa got approved and we drove through, right? So it was about maybe 27-hour drive from where I was located to the border of Austria. When you enter the border, when you approach the border, basically the protocol is that you come out of the car, you raise your hand up and you say, I surrender. And then they take you to this camp. It's basically, I would call it a prison because you can't get out of there. So you enter this location. It's called Traiskirchen, and it's right outside of Vienna. And you end up staying there for about 30 days. And that 30-day period, they run your background checks, right? Because they want to make sure you're not a criminal, you're not a political spy, or whatever it may be. You have to go through an interview process, and they ask you, we have 3 asylum countries. So at that time in 87, it was Australia, Canada, and the United States. And they would ask my parents to submit their application in order of preference where they wanted to end up, essentially. And so my mother ended up putting choice 1, US, choice 2, US, choice 3, US, right? So there was no other option.
Yeah, that's pretty
And,
smart.
and so during the interview process for that first initial 30 days, they most likely are going to accept you into an asylum country if you have a sponsor located in that country who is willing to take economic responsibility for you entering the country. And so we had that. One of my mother's best childhood friends was already here, and he was kind enough to sponsor us, and he lived in New York. So if happenstance he lived in California, or because there's a lot of Armenians in California, we would have ended up in California. So it really depended on where our sponsor was located. I don't know how it works now, though.
Okay, now it makes sense because I'm like, how does all this work? I mean, because you just can't get off of a boat and come over here with no support system and stuff. So your family, you already had at least a connections over here over the years, so it just made the transition a little bit more easier. But now you're dealing with the fact that you got to leave your brother and sister behind. They're clearly older now. I mean, when did you actually reconnect with them? Like about what age, and how difficult was that? Because you've been away for quite some time, and they're still in well, the walls have gotten taken down, but you got to explain to them what you went through to get to where you at. And I'm pretty sure they're like, well, why did we get left behind?
Yeah, so actually, I want to go back to the last topic. So I want to differentiate between legal immigrants, that's the process I described, versus illegal immigrants. When people enter the country
Hmm.
with no visa, no paperwork, no one knows they're in the country, no sponsors. That those are, I'm sorry, I just want to differentiate between those two.
Go ahead.
The legal immigration is where you need a sponsor and economic support and things like that, or you're not allowed to come in. The illegal way is when you just enter off the boat and you end up wherever you end up, basically.
Wow, it's crazy. So
Yes.
let's talk about your siblings. What was that like?
Yeah.
When did you reconnect? And what were some of the things that you first shared when you was able to actually contact them?
Yeah. So right before we got on a plane to the United States, from Austria, they were coming over with my grandmother in order to fly with us because when my mother applied for her visa and her citizenship to the United States, the children had to come with her at that time. So we were separated for about 2 years, and then we all flew into New York, JFK, all five of us together as a family. So technically they were 5 years old at that time and did not really understand what was happening. They just knew a lot of different things were going on.
Hmm.
And but I guess later on in life, we did talk about all of that, and life was pretty difficult, right? Economically here. And so with three children, imagine what that must have been like.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
What do you remember growing up that was the toughest part of your journey before going into adulthood in college? What are some of the three of the most impactful things that really was difficult for you to get over?
I don't have anything I couldn't get over. You just kind of do it, there's no option. I went to school, I made friends. Actually, the very first friend I made in this country in eighth grade, her name is Daniela, and we still talk. We still talk. And back then, she was a little bit further along in her English. She was from Brazil, and she was teaching me English, and we ended up sitting together everywhere in all our classes, and we were best friends. We would hang out all the time. I mean, I can't complain, life was
Right.
really, it was good. It,
So,
for me.
okay. So then you wind up getting married, and what changed? Because you start picking up weight, because this is where the other part of your journey happens. We got weight issues, and then we dealt with something else during COVID where you switched opportunities. Tell me a little bit about both of those scenarios. Why did you switch during the COVID, and then what led on to the weight issues?
Yes. So if you can imagine life as an immigrant, it was all about earning a living, right? Going to school, getting an education so you can get a degree, so you can get a good job, so you can do all the things. And that's the biggest trauma when you are an immigrant is how to survive economically. And so that's all I was worried about. And then at some point in the road, a lot of my family kind of broke apart. They moved to Florida. I stayed in New York. I supported myself. There were a lot of health issues in my family. And so I ended up actually taking care of my brother and my sister, supporting my grandmother on my own, right? So I had an apartment in New York and everybody was living there. And my main purpose in my life was to earn a living. That's what I was for. That's what I took on, right? I made that my responsibility. So I worked like a maniac, um, day and night, 3 jobs, nonstop, 7 days a week, so I can keep up with supporting everybody so we can all make it essentially. And so that was my mentality. I did not find it to be a burden. Never complained. I just did what I had to do. I've always kind of been like that.
Hmm.
And so that moved through my whole life, right? So in my mid 20s, I started building my own companies. That's when the whole internet thing started. And my degree is in computer science and engineering. So I was like, well, let me figure this internet thing out. I started building e-commerce sites, all kinds of things, and launching them on Google. At one point, I think I had about 15 different e-com stores. We're talking 20 years ago, okay?
Yeah.
And there was no Facebook, there was no social media back then. There was barely Google, okay? There was something like called MySpace and Friendster that were starting to pop up.
I remember those. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was very interested in all this. So I started figuring out how the heck does Google work, and why are some sites on the top, and like how do I get to the top, right? So that's like the big thing. How do I get to be number one on this particular term or whatever it is? And so I started doing that, and eventually ended up quitting my corporate job. And I still think about that. I'm like, man, what a dumbass move that was. Sorry.
What
No
do you
curse.
mean? What the dumbass? Like, what made it a dumbass move? You mean quitting your job from corporate?
Yeah, that wasn't like, nobody told me that being an entrepreneur was really hard.
Yeah. Yeah. What was the hardest part about now realizing that, yeah, you're an entrepreneur now. You're not getting a check because you just quit corporate. You now have to make money. You now, well, let me rephrase it. Welcome to America.
Yes. Yes. Right. So thank goodness I was that dumb, because if I knew any better, I probably would not have ever done it. But the hardest part is you have no security, right?
Right.
And there's no guarantee. So you could bust your ass for 29 hours a day if you can, and you can make no progress, right? Because when, the whole saying is, oh, if you have a good work ethic, you're going to be fine. That's not true when you're an entrepreneur. You could have the best work ethic, you could be disciplined, you could do all the things, and you could still fail.
Mhm.
Why? Because a lot of times a business takes 2, 3 years to really marinate in its marketing and get a customer base. I mean, nobody told me all of that stuff.
Right.
So, yeah, that was not easy, right? And so you have to learn how to be really scrappy. You have to learn how to hustle. You have to learn how to never, ever get down in your own BS in your own head. And because there's no time for that, right? You don't have the luxury to wallow in your own misery that your project over here that you hope was going to make you a gazillion dollars the first month it launched is now working. You don't have that luxury. You just have to keep going. And so that's what I did. I just kept going and going and going, and eventually everything started working and generating revenue. And then I had to start hiring people. Then I had a kid. And then I remember, I think it was my daughter. She was maybe about 6 months old. I was walking around with her. We had an apartment in Metuchen, and because I had all these e-commerce stores, right?
Mhm.
I had inventory everywhere in the whole place. And I was walking around with her in my arm and feeding her. And I had to hire someone to help me. And then I had to hire another person and another person. And we were all operating out of this apartment with my newborn and me walking around with the baby bottle and just running this whole thing out of my small apartment. And that's how it had to be, because I just had a baby, then I had a second baby. And then everything kind of migrated over from having e-commerce stores to also doing consulting. Like, how do you get to the top of the Google result? How do you run pay-per-click ads? I figured all that stuff out for myself. And then people started hiring me to do it for them. And then that company grew. So now there was all these companies all over the place. And I never took care of myself,
Mm.
right? I ate whatever was there. I never went to the gym. You wouldn't catch me dead in the
Right, right,
gym.
right.
remember the F I got. I failed gym classes. And so I didn't even know what DB was. When I first started working with a trainer in the program, it said DB and BB and the RD. I was like, this is some other language. I have no idea what this stuff
Right,
means.
right,
And so that's the mindset that I had, is that it was a vanity, number one. It was a luxury, number two. And nobody really cared what I looked like, because my job was to earn a living. It wasn't to look good. I
right,
was not going to make any money looking good.
right, right. So, what were some of the things that we know we know you wasn't taking care of yourself? You got kids. You realizing what it takes to be an entrepreneur. So, two-part question. Roughly, how long did it take for you to develop the company? Then, what were some of the health issues that you was actually dealing with that took you into the gym? Because you're taking care of your kids, you're married, you're trying to run the family. You know, I tell people weight loss, weight problems happen quickly, but you don't see it quickly because it's usually I do that tomorrow. I do that tomorrow, and tomorrow becomes a year. A year becomes 2 years. A year becomes 3 years. What was the grace period between starting the company to you actually realizing this is a fucking problem?
Yeah, so I was never overweight as a child, right? So up until 25, which is when I met my kid's dad, I was not overweight. Never really. I was not particularly thin or athletic, but I was not overweight.
Mhm.
And so I had no habits to carry me through stressful periods. I had no concept of how to feed myself properly to mitigate weight gain or any type of health issues. So after the first kid, I gained a ton of weight because I had such a terrible nausea during the pregnancy. All I could eat were bagels for 9 months and steak. That was it. And so you can imagine what happened.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I got very overweight with the pregnancy. She was actually born 10 pounds, 2 ounces, and I'm 5'3". So if you can imagine, and she's 5'9" now. So you
Mhm.
can imagine the difference in that physically. But I couldn't lose the weight after the first pregnancy, no matter what I did. So that was at about 30.
Mhm.
And so I kept gaining more weight. So instead of dropping the pregnancy weight down, I was putting on more weight. And I was wearing pregnancy clothes up until I got pregnant the second time. So I was still in my maternity clothes when I got pregnant for the second time. And then I stayed in my maternity clothes up until about 37, which is when I started having all kinds of problems. So between 30 to 37, I had gained 80 pounds and I could not get it off.
When you went to the doctor, your OBGY, your endocrinologist and stuff, did the increase in weight cause additional problems health wise for you?
Well, not in normal checkups, but I drove myself into the ground so hard that I ended up in the hospital
Wow.
at about 37. So the first time I went in, I was like, oh man, I thought I was having a heart attack because I had such terrible chest pain. Ran to ER. They took one look at me and ER was packed. So there were probably like 100 people in ER waiting to be seen. And I walk in and I'm like, holy shit, I'm going to die because I'm going to have to wait like for 100 people to go before me. And then they saw me, imagine 37, and I can't breathe. I'm clutching my chest. I'm having chest pains. I can't get a breath in. They immediately took me because they thought I was having a heart attack. And that's what I thought too. I mean, I could barely get a breath in, and I was in a lot of pain. And so I was in there for about 24 hours. They couldn't figure out what was wrong. They said we can't find anything. There's nothing. The blood works fine. All your EKGs are fine. Your scans, whatever. Go see a cardiologist. So I went to go see a cardiologist. They found some little murmur or like a little sound or whatever it is. And they said, that's it. That's all you have. I don't see evidence of you having a heart attack or stroke or anything. Right. And so I go home and I'm like, whatever, screw this. Move along. I don't have time to deal with this crap. Right. And so I get right back on my hamster wheel and right back into daily life, doing all the things I was doing before. And then I ended up having this problem again. A few months later, I had to go back to ER again for chest pain, and it was probably some kind of a panic attack. But they said at that point, they're like, well, call up a holistic doctor, see, maybe they can help you. Here's a Xanax, go home, get some sleep. And that's when I realized, oh man, this is not going away. I need to do something because it's wasting my time going to ER. You see where like the mind is at?
Yeah.
Wasting my time going to ER. I have work to do. I can't deal with this. I gotta like figure out how to make it stop. That was my motivation. And then I started thinking, well, let me call this holistic doctor. I talked to her. It was a 2-hour intake. I've never actually had a doctor or anybody listen to me talk for 2 hours about like my health. And so she said, you got to lose weight. You've got pre-diabetes markers. You're starting to have all these other symptoms. Your blood work is all over the place. You're having panic attacks, anxiety attacks. You can't walk up the stairs, Terry. You can't walk a mile without being out of breath. Like, and she just gave it to me really straight. And I said, holy cow, I gotta lose weight.
Mm. So when you went in the gym to start losing weight, how did you worked with a trainer, I take it, to design what you wanted to be done? How long did this journey take? How long did you start, when did you start seeing progress, and what did you change? And more importantly, what was the most difficult part of that journey? Because you're just not going into any gym and master it.
Yeah, so it was I'm a slow learner, Andre. I didn't get it right away.
Yeah, we know you didn't know what DB means. You didn't know what rack your dumbbells up. I get the terminology.
I was slow, let me tell you. So I started out with the DIY mindset, like, oh, let me try like all these diets out there. Let me try keto, let me try South Beach, let me try all these things. There was a million diets I tried. And then now I learned there's 40,000 diet books on Amazon. So I'm surprised that I didn't do all 40,000, but I
Yeah.
did do about 30. And every single time, every diet that I did, I lost weight. It worked. And then because I was such an overachiever, I was like, okay, I'm done with this. That's a waste of time. Go back to work and go right back to my normal behavior.
Wow.
But my normal behavior back then was ignorance about nutrition, did not know my own blind spots, did not know I was diving into jars of Nutella to cope with my existence back then, because my existence was all about work. And there was nothing there. There was nothing else for me. And it was about being a mom and work, and that was it. And so I was going right back to what I was doing before. And not only would I gain the weight that I lost, not only would it come back, but I would gain more. So every time I did a diet, I'd lose a little bit of weight and then get more weight back on, and then more weight. And then eventually I was starting to get bigger and bigger. And then I realized one day, okay, this diet nonsense is not working out for me. They don't work. So every time I do a diet, I gain more weight.
Hmm.
And so I decided I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to invent my own diet.
Really?
So
How do you invent your own nutritional diet? That's a new one on me. So how did that even come about?
I decided that, so that's when Peloton, by the way, launched their first bike.
Okay.
And so I decided I was going to ride my Peloton bike 3 times a day. And all I was going to eat were salads all day. All I ate was salad. I did not eat any protein. I did eat a lot of fat because they had a lot of avocado and feta cheese, but that was it.
Okay.
So I did. I lost 30 pounds doing that. And then I started panicking because I thought, oh man, like I know what's going to happen right now if I stop this, right? So if I stop riding the Peloton and I stop eating like this, I know I had experience. I had gotten smarter by then. So I was like, okay, I know what's going to happen and I don't want that to happen. So I'm going to, for the first time in my life, ask for help legitimately, make myself really vulnerable,
Hmm.
put my ego down and ask in earnest for help. And that's how I ended up finding a coach who taught me this is completely backwards what you're doing. Your
Yeah.
invention.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't want to say that. I was going to let you tell the story. Okay. So somebody recognized that that was really not a good nutritional regimen. So then what happens?
So that's when I had to start learning how to lift weights. And that was an experience I will never forget. I mean, I was 40, wait, 30, not 20, no, 2019, however old I was, 40.
You want me to do
And
the math? You want me to add it up? It was 40.
and so I had to learn. I had never picked up a dumbbell. I did not know what a deadlift was. I did not know any of that.
Mhm. How did
Mhm.
that, how did that change? Because you can't go in the gym. Now you're talking to the top trainer, period. So I know nutrition is endorsed with the Cleveland Clinic. So I know nutrition. I get it coming up with your own regimen. My nutritional regimen came from my own experience, but also trying to decode the nutritional pyramid at the same time where I discovered that's bullshit. This is not how nutrition works. This isn't how the body responds. This isn't a way to control your insulin and your blood sugar spikes, but this is the way to do it. It's not rocket science. It's what understanding what a calorie is and what a calorie means. It's understanding what the values of protein is. It's also understanding the three classifications of carbohydrates and how they affect the body. But I'm a stern believer in building muscle. Muscle is the key factor to weight loss, period. No matter what you do, you got to have muscle. The more muscle you have, the better fat burner you are. But with that taken in consideration, now you're adding weightlifting into your regimen. What did you change nutritional wise? Because clearly you're not gonna do it with lettuce and avocados.
Right. So that was a very eye-opening time for me because my coach gave me my macros.
Okay.
And so, so she did both. She gave me my strength training program and my daily macros.
Hmm.
And so I got this document. It says, my macros, blah, blah, blah. I'm, I'm from like a computer science and engineering background. I'm looking at macros. I'm like, what is this Excel spreadsheet? Like, what do I got to do something with macros and Excel? I was so confused. I didn't know what that was, right? And so I figured it out. But it was so interesting because I will never forget, and I see this now with my own clients. She gave me, I remember it like it was yesterday, a 1,500 calorie uh, day, right? 7 days a week. And it was broken up into, I believe, 155 grams of protein, 140 carbs, and like maybe 45 grams of fat.
Hmm.
And I had to break down each meal equally, essentially, right? So I had about 30 grams of protein per meal 5 times a day.
Hmm.
I had 40 carbs per meal, pre-workout and post-workout. And then I had a little bit less in the other meals, and then equal amounts of fat across 5. So 9 grams of fat per
Hmm.
meal. And when I actually attempted to put these meals together, they were huge. Like they were massive meals that I had to eat. And all I was eating, I believe, when I looked back at my big giant salad days, I was barely eating 900 calories a
Mm,
day, maybe.
right.
And so I couldn't eat all the food. I was not able to get 1,500 calories in of whole food when I first started out. So she had to back me off of that and then build me back up
Mhm.
essentially into a reverse diet. But yeah, it was very eye-opening that a lot of times we're under eating or overeating and we don't realize where we're actually how we're actually supposed to eat in terms of how much protein, what the right proportion of carbs are, and the timing of the carbs, especially starch, how much fat we're actually consuming. Most people, when I first start working with them and I have them audit their food for a couple of
Mhm.
days, they're at like 90 grams of fat per day and
Mhm.
60 grams of protein.
Mhm.
So it's completely upside down and like 300 carbs a day. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like that's what I must have been doing as well in order to gain that much weight so quickly in my 30s. So very eye-opening.
Now remember, I'm older than you. So I've been teaching nutrition for many years. And I tell women and men, you're either going to be in two categories. You're either going to be anabolic or you're going to be catabolic. And it's all based on your food intake and understanding that the U.S., the food and the health departments once said you got to have 1,500 calories a day. The average person doesn't do that with whole foods, like you said, but they'll go out to eat and one meal will give them all of that, but it's not nutritionally balanced. So this is another example why women have a lot of muscle mass or catabolic syndrome. It's another reason why men uh, carry have a high levels of gynecomastia, which is an increase in the estrogen levels. Is another reason why women have hormonal problems um, for this very reason. And it's not their fault. It's the fault of businesses tricking them into not understanding the power of understanding whole foods. Because just like with you, I just tell my clients, you need to break these up every 3 to 4 hours. It's not a lot of food, but you got to realize every 3 to 4 hours, you need to be trying to consume something to keep your metabolic system going, and understanding what you're putting in your body and which one out of all these is most important. So you wind up actually succeeding. Thank you for that. I'm glad that you um, took the responsibility of yourself because if you don't, I tell people, if you don't take responsibility for your own health, nobody else is going to do it. If you smoke and you wind up having lung cancer, you know what they're going to say? You've been smoking all your life. Why didn't you put the cigarette down? You've been overweight all your life. Why didn't you go in the gym? It's people not taking accountability. So you go and you take accountability for yourself. But out of that journey, something beautiful happens. You wind up becoming a trainer yourself and teaching people holistic ways of not only eating, but to combine both the holistic approach of clean, healthy eating with the power of training. And let me clarify something because you're the trainer now. I'm retired from that industry. But when you mention strength training, a lot of women get petrified. And I tell women, you don't have to always lift weights to build muscle. Tell me a little bit about your program and how did that come about with you being the student and now becoming the teacher?
Yeah, so in the process of this journey, right? Because when you're changing your entire neural pathways, all your neural pathways about everything you believed, at that time I was 40. So for 40 years, this is what I did and this is how I lived.
Mhm.
And I started having to change that. So many interesting things popped up. And it's almost like when you've made a mess in your room and you start cleaning things up, and putting things away in the proper place, you find these like all kinds of things, right? If you haven't been keeping everything running smoothly, you're going to end up finding the boogeyman in the closet, this other thing over here that's been chirping, maybe something that died, like, some animal in the, I don't know, like you find all kinds of stuff. And so I started calling them the boogeymen that would pop up in my head every now and then and just take over. They would hijack my consciousness essentially. And one of them I realized was I was a workaholic.
Mm.
Clearly, big shock, right? I was an alcoholic.
What?
Oh yeah, I was on my way to getting alcoholized big time. I was addicted to sugar and food, and I used food to cope, and alcohol and everything else, right? I had all kinds of things that were bothering me internally as a human being that were not being addressed because my only purpose and mission in life was to work. I was so consumed in the addictions, and they were, not all bad. Like if you really think about it from the outside, there's a lot of benefit to living with a workaholic, right? There's a
Really?
lot. Well, yeah.
What was the benefit?
They earn a living. They're very motivated. They're high achievers. A lot of them succeed greatly in whatever it is that they hyper focus on, because they hyper focus on that, right? So they're very they deliver,
Yeah, but
right?
being a workaholic also put you in a dysfunctional mental state of mind too. So, however,
Yeah.
I do agree somewhat with that, but I do also understand that that can be detrimental because even though you're a workaholic, you allowed other things to get out of control. So let me go back a minute. Even though you recognize the body in the nutritional aspect, what did you do for your mental? Because what you just said, workaholic, these things started in your childhood because that was your survival mode. So are you a workaholic or are you in survival mode? Because that's how you came from a communist country to everybody disbandment, and now you're staying there to take care of your family. Is it really workaholic or is it cultural experience? And more importantly, what did you do to recognize your mental? We see you dealing with your physical, but what are you doing for your mental health? Because quote unquote, you just said things that happened in your childhood, but you camouflaged it by saying I'm a workaholic. But I'm seeing fear-based leading to workaholic, leading to health issues. So I'm not a doctor and I'm not a
No, you're
therapist.
right. You're 100% right. And that's such a legitimate question and such a great question, because is it societal trauma that creates the addictions, or are we just naturally inclined to end up with these types of behaviors, addictions, coping skills, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Survival mode, right? So it depends, right, on the person and what they're most inclined to is what I would say. Like we all have predispositions to go in one direction or the other. And they've done these really interesting studies where they'll take somebody who's gone through similar traumas and see which way they go. Would they go to the drug addiction route, or will they cope with the workaholism and high achieving way of coping with it, right? So which route will somebody going to take really depends on how their mind works.
Mhm.
But I didn't know, I was unaware that I was doing these things, right? So I had no awareness, and I had massive blind spots because in my mind, this was such a great thing. I had to do these things because this was my responsibility. And I lived like that for a long time until I realized, like, oh man, like this is killing me. This is actually creating a health crisis for me. I am very unhappy. I just cannot keep going like that. And so, the company I had at the time, it still exists. I'm just not in it anymore, was not helping me in that, in the mental health and psychological health and emotional health realm, because it was very demanding. So as soon as somebody would demand something, and it was, always fires, it's a media company, it's a marketing agency. There was always a fire going on, right? And so it would suck me right back into it. And no matter how much work I did to, have a boundary, have space, go to the gym, do like slow down a little bit, I would always get sucked right back into it with some other fire that was happening, or I had to go here, I had to go there, try. It just wasn't working in my favor. And so in 2020, right in the middle of COVID, I was like, I'm done. That's it. It's over. I'm done. I'm walking away. I don't care what happens.
Mm. So what did you do to deal with your mental aspect? Because like I said, we talked about your physical, but what did you do mentally? I know you walked away, but did you seek professional help? And the reason I'm saying this is I didn't hear you say that, but you're teaching other people. And I'm a firm believer as a trainer. And I tell people before you even come to me, I need to know where your mind is at first and foremost, because it's going to tell me if you're going to go right or left. That way I know how to design your program effectively. Because if you don't have the mindset and you suffer from some type of trauma or whatever, and these things led to your weight issues, you might want to start there first. So before we wrap up, what was method did you take for your mental stability? We know you quit your job, but quitting your job doesn't resonate and still recognizing the issue. An issue was still there. How did you deal with that part of your journey?
100%. So I had an emotional eating therapist, like an official therapist, for about 8 months. And we had to unpack not only the emotional, because I made a lot of parallels between the eating and all the other addictions.
Mm-hmm.
They're very similar, right? The addictions are all trauma-based, and they're a response to whatever it is that your brain is trying to keep you safe from. And it could be different things, right? So the emotional eating aspect is what really opened the door to me understanding that I was shoving down feelings that I was having as a human being that I wasn't in my mind allowed to have. And I was using essentially food because it was more socially accepted. Alcohol, I was a lot more aware of that I was starting to have an issue, and it wasn't as socially accepted, and everything else would have been way less socially accepted. So it's very easy to reach for the food.
Mm.
And sugar is actually more addictive than cocaine. I've read a bunch of places. And it's very hard to give up because you have access to it 24/7. And it's used as a numbing mechanism. So and then I unpacked that in about 8 months of therapy. And I realized, like, wow, I need to keep investing back into this. So I started taking courses. I started reading a lot of books. I got certified as an emotional eating coach, actually. Spent another about 9 months learning how to identify and how to help people unpack and the entire process, but from a coach's perspective, which ultimately also helps you as an individual to help other people. I did all kinds of educational seminars on not just the certifications and the licenses, but also workshops, attended a lot of events, spoke to a lot of people, read a lot of books. Highly recommend Atomic Habits by James Clear to help you really navigate your own internal thoughts and how those lead to behaviors and habits and how to learn how to rewire those. Highly recommend the book called Outlive by Peter Attia to actually explain to you why you should be paying attention to strength training, your lean muscle mass, to your nutrition, your protein, your sleep, your emotional health, all of these things. And over the period of the last 8 years, this has become a passion, an obsession, something that I literally think about all the time. And the first step to helping other people is to truly help your own self. Because if you can't help your own self, then, you know, you have
What
no
what
business helping
what good
anybody
are
else.
you to anybody else, pretty much? You know, Terry, such a beautiful story. Thank you so much for taking time out to come and share that beast mindset that you gotten. Welcome to America. You know,
And
it was a journey. You're here now. Welcome to America. How can the viewers reach out to you?
you can find me in two places. I only have two places. Instagram, it's How Good Can It Get? And my website, thehouseofrose.com. The name of the company is actually Thor, Thor, the House of Rose, because we're all about strength. We're all about being as beastly as possible and having that beast mindset, because if you don't do it, nobody else is going to do it for you, right? Like you said.
Terry, once again, thank you so much for taking time to come on. Make sure you guys reach out to her. All it takes is a click, a phone call, or an email to change somebody's life or to get your life changed. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another exciting episode of the Andre the Beast Crayton show.